Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to Broadcast to Post, KeyCode Media's series hosting industry professionals discussing post-production, broadcast, and AV technology topics that you care about. Today, we'll be getting into how you can collaborate better across all your creative software applications. I'm your host, Jeff Sengpiel, Chief Technologist here at KeyCode Media. Going to be a lot of pieces in our puzzle today, featuring a chat with our guest speakers, Suzanne Greenfield and Dan Gordish from Boardwalk Pictures. They're going to talk about how collaboration has made documentary content easier and less labor-intensive, even during a pandemic. A nod from Route 6 will be getting into the beginning of the process, talking about Content Agent and how it gets your content into your creative environment faster. Then Michael Krulik from Avid. He's going to help us discover how you can collaborate better by sharing projects from almost all of your creative tools on one storage platform. We're blessed at KeyCode to have Dan Wagner as our senior workflow engineer, as well as an Avid certified instructor for Nexis. We'll dig into some of the important things to think about when you're gluing it all together. At the end, we'll be bringing back our guests from today to answer your questions live. Please submit questions at any time using the Vimeo, Facebook, or YouTube chats. All right, let's get started. Bring it on, Dan Wagner. Hey, Dan. How are you, and what do you see shaking in the post-production world?
Well, hi Jeff. The biggest thing I'm seeing, the biggest shift is with a lot more remote work happening. But the question is, how do we get that remote work done? Do we need to move files across the world, or are we going to keep them in the machines back at the office and then remote into edit workstations and control those machines so you're not having to move giant files all over the place? So yeah, remote seems to be the biggest thing, and it's even more important that you take care of your infrastructure on premises in this remote world.
Usually when we talk about editing software, we talk about a single software, Media Composer, Resolve, Premiere Pro, After Effects, but today we're diving into how they all work together in a post-production workflow. How have you seen post-production collaboration evolve over the last few years?
Well, I'm seeing a lot more interaction between like Media Composer and other pieces of software out there. We have traditionally always had workflows to and from Photoshop and After Effects, but now we're seeing these other tools come on board, and they want to be the primary tool that you're cutting with. The reality is Adobe Premiere, Resolve, all of these competing products actually work very well with Nexis storage. It's as if you had your files stored locally on your computer, but they're shared. You get a little bit of that shared work group experience. Plus, you keep all your media in one location, which makes the media managers really happy.
We're going to be joined later by Avid discussing Nexis and Route 6 discussing their content agent, and I wanted to get your input. Avid Nexis has always been the preferred storage for creative collaboration for Avid products, Pro Tools, Media Composer, Symphony. How has that changed over time, and where do you think Avid Nexis is today? Well,
our clients are seeing more stability in the Nexis engines and the Nexis file system. They're also seeing a greater size. And the media packs now, you can get media packs up to 120 terabytes per media pack. Then the other thing that's come about in the recent years is speed. With the introduction of the E2 SSD engines, we now have super fast capability for high resolution content. It's a phenomenal tool for those clients that are working in film.
Thanks, Dan. We'll see you in a little bit for the live Q&A. Now, we're off to our presentations from Avid and Route 6. Michael, glad to see you.
Guys, thanks for hosting this webinar and having me on. My name is Mark Pusis. I'm a territory sales manager for Avid. I'm also arguably one of their storage specialists. And Nexis is a passion of mine. Storage for media in general is a passion of mine. And so I wanted to do a quick intro into what Michael is going to be showing here with his overview of our management console. First things I like to do is kind of dispel some myths and make sure people understand what Nexis is. And I say Nexis is a media optimized, durable, software defined scale out storage that provides fast and consistent connectivity to media users while making admin's life easier and enabling collaboration. That's a mouthful and quite a lot. Basically understand that it's quick, it's easy to use, and those are kind of the things we're going to try and show off today. What it's not only for Avid houses, and that's a big thing that I had to learn coming from different storage vendors and different manufacturers. It's not crazy expensive. It's very competitive. It's not difficult to use, and it doesn't silo your data to just Avid workflows. So 7 reasons to consider Nexis. As I said, it's optimized for media workflows. It's fast, it's predictable, it's highly scalable, it's resilient, it's easy to use, and it's flexible. I would say that Avid is the only enterprise grade storage manufacturer that's completely focused on media and entertainment. There are a lot of other great manufacturers out there that do awesome jobs with storage, but there's some features that Avid puts into their secret sauce, if you will, that makes them really just a notch above, and it's why I ended up coming here. We can talk about that later through the Q&A session. I'm one of the panelists, so feel free to hit me with any questions you guys might have. But right now, I think what we're really going to show mostly is how easy to use the interface is and how flexible it is. And I think you guys will be able to see how scalable it is as well. So I'm going to hand it off to Michael. I'm going to stop sharing. Mr. Krulik, if you'd like to take it away, you're most welcome, sir. Thank you so much.
That's so formal, Mr. Krulik. Thank you so much, Mark. That was a great intro to Avid Nexis. By the way, if you didn't know, Nexis stands for the Next Generation Intelligent Storage. Thank you, KeyCode, for hosting today's event. I'm Michael Krulik, and I'll be taking you through the management console for Avid Nexis. Now, there are many Nexis configurations available to suit your storage needs, but the ease of how you set it up and maintain it is key to a really great experience. Now, it doesn't matter if you're an all Avid facility, all Adobe, Apple, or Blackmagic, a combination of all of these, or even have Autodesk in your workflow, they are all supported platforms on Avid Nexis. Now, I'm in Burbank, and I'm using a web browser to log into the Avid Nexis at our corporate headquarters in Burlington, Massachusetts. So you can monitor and manage your Nexis from anywhere. We're currently taking a look at the Avid Nexis dashboard, which at a glance gives me a look at who's connected to my Avid Nexis system. What is the client bandwidth? You can actually dictate who has what sort of bandwidth connected to the Avid system, depending on their role. You can see things like the version of Avid Nexis that you have. Any of these panels can also be blown up a little larger if you just choose the little icon in the upper right-hand corner, or again, you can get an overall look here. Now, I am taking a look at the current system, my Nexis system. I do have a selection here for cloud, and these are the Avid Nexis cloud spaces. By subscription, you can set up to have cloud workspaces where you can have Nexis cloud spaces where you can upload high-res files or projects, offloading them from your current system to free up space. And again, that's something that you can set up, and once it's activated, you have access to that dashboard as well to see how much storage is being used. Again, just a really nice, clean UI. Now, down the left-hand side here, we have access to system information, we have access to storage, monitoring tools, setting up users, and also looking at logs of the Avid Nexis system. And we're going to take a look at a portion of this. Again, under System, we're looking at the dashboard. Under the bandwidth limits, this is where you can actually see and set up bandwidth depending on what any role, depending on what every user has. Maybe there are some users who don't need complete bandwidth to be pulled from the rest of the system. You can decide who has what bandwidth connected to Avid Nexis. The installers here is nice because it's easy to go in and set up a client to your Avid Nexis system. You just plug in a network cable to the Nexus. You go to the local IP address or the host IP address for your Nexus. You have access to the Avid Nexis clients right here, whether it's Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever you need. You download the software, and in a matter of minutes, you're connected and up and running. Other things like, system setup. This is where you're installing your chassis. You can currently see that I have 3 Nexis E2 chassis set up on the system and a system director. Depending on how many clients you have, depending on your storage, this is where you'll get an overall look as to all of the chassis that are connected to your Nexis system, and also how you install them to be configured together. Or the main thing I want to show you here is how you set up your storage and your workspaces. First thing I want to point out are your media packs. Now, every chassis has a media pack. A media pack is 10 drives. Each media pack is set up depending on the storage that you have purchased. You have the controllers. The controller is the heart of every chassis. That is your motherboard. That's how you connect to other Nexis chassis in your configuration. An important part to your Nexis configuration are your workspaces. And a workspace is how you're dividing up your overall storage depending on how you want to use it. Do you want to have workspaces for just Adobe projects and media? Do you want to have workspaces for just graphics? Do you want to have workspaces for just Avid projects, or workspaces for VFX and finishing? You can set that up depending on how you want to work. You're currently seeing that there are 34 workspaces set up on this Avid Nexis in Burlington. You can take a look and see things like, the capacity. You can set up any sort of mirroring and protection where you can decide per workspace how much protection you want to have over your media. If I go in and take a look at this workspace right here, I double click, we do get an overall snapshot of that workspace where we can see how much storage is being taken up. We see the values right here. We can also see here what users have access to read, write, or even not see that workspace. And we can also dynamically reallocate any sort of storage here. So if you define a certain amount of storage, I could go in and add or take away storage at any time just by moving the slider here. But let's go ahead and start by creating a workspace, just to show you how easy that is. We hit Add. I'm going to create a brand new workspace. I'm going to call that workspace Media 2. This is where we can decide how much protection we want to have on our workspace. If we want to have it totally mirrored, or do you want to do single disk or dual disk protection. That again is decided per workspace, which is great. We can also go in, we can choose how large we want to make that workspace. Let's decide on 100 gigs. It does give us how much storage we do have available here. We can also go in and choose to send any sort of signal or warning if there's an error on this workspace, or even if maybe the storage is getting down to maybe 10%, or even decide on unused gigs. You can decide where you want your warning to be triggered. And that's just a little warning that's going to come up on the dashboard. You'll also see when I scroll down here, this is where we can set up by users who has the ability to read, write, or even not see that workspace at all. So I'm going to go to my user right here. I'm going to select myself, and I'm going to give myself read and write access to this workspace. So currently, I'm the only person who can see the workspace Media 2. We'll select Save, and that's done. And that is now set up. Again, I mentioned being able to reallocate the storage. So at any time, I could go in and add storage or take away storage to any workspace that I have access to. Again, I'm the administrator, so I have access to everything. But let's go in and set up a new user and decide if they have access to go in and resize workspaces. So under the users portion here, you'll see all of the users. There's currently 36 users. Let's go ahead and add a new user here. And let's add Henry here as a user. We'll give Henry a password. And you'll see here that I can also choose if I want Henry to be able to resize that workspace. We'll go ahead and say sure. You'll see here that there are also groups. Let's say you have a series of users who maybe are producers or assistants or editors or VFX. You can go in and add users to specific groups and then decide per group who has access to a workspace. But Henry here, he can resize. We're just going to go in and say that he can take a look at the workspace that I just created, Media 2. Let's say maybe the projects here, and also the linked and media that we have access to. And maybe and the Premiere workspace. So we've set Henry up with a password, certain workspaces. I hit save, and Henry is now a user. So let's log out of the management console from the administrator. We'll log in as Henry. We'll type in Henry's secret password of Avid. And you'll see that Henry has access to the dashboard, but not all of the administrator controls down the left-hand side here. Henry can go in and install clients, and Henry has access to the workspaces. But look, he only has access to the 5 that I gave him access to. He has no control over the other ones. But if I go to Media 2, he can go in and resize that workspace at any time. If I didn't give him access, he could take a look at this information but would have no access to be able to resize. So just want to do a quick highlight of the Avid Nexis Management Console, being able to go in and take a look at the dashboard, get a quick glance at the information there, set up storage space, set up workspaces, set up the users, and just an overall look. And again, this is done if you're using Adobe, if you're using Blackmagic, if you're using Avid, or have Autodesk in the mix there as well. It's all the same management console to be able to control that. It's just choosing how you want to customize your Avid Nexis storage system to your storage needs. Okay, at this point, we're going to hand it back to KeyCode for the Q&A.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining us today. I'd also like to thank KeyCode for having us and setting up this presentation. My name is Anand, and I'm the Director of Sales Engineering for Route 6 products at Bessemer. We're going to talk about Content Agent today. Content Agent is a workflow automation tool that can help make any post-production tasks more efficient, reliable, and flexible. So you're looking at Content Agent's main UI right now, and it's all based off a database in the background. So everything you see here is information stored in our database. So I have a few clips, I have some templates, I have some workflows. If we look at these 2 clips, you'll notice that there is a camera card, which came from a Canon C300, as well as a QuickTime. If we hit info on one of these clips, you can see that we'll extract as much info as possible, and that includes things like audio tracks, and then video format, frame rate, color space, etc. The most important part is all this information can be used to make your workflow more powerful. If we look at this, you'll see it's a 4-clip card, and if I actually reveal this card, all it is a raw camera card structure straight from the camera. We support many card formats, ranging from Sony to Panasonic to things like drones, Red cameras, ARRI RAW, and a lot more. If we look at this metadata, it's very similar to standard clip metadata, except we also have extended card metadata. So depending on the card type that comes in, we'll extract as much information as possible. So going across the top briefly, from the import tab, you can do things like import camera cards. We'll automatically recognize camera cards, scanning through multiple folders if needed. We can import from S3. We can import from SpectraLogic, Black Pearl. We also have the ability to burn DVDs and Blu-rays. We can set up watch folders here. And we have the Jobs tab. This is where you can monitor your job queue. So going back to the store for a minute and to our workflows folder, workflows are the most interesting part of Content Agent, and workflows can be as simple as you need. So if we look at this one, it's very simple. So we're just analyzing the incoming file, making a DNxHR Avid compatible media set, and writing that to our C drive. but they can be a lot more complicated. So in this case, we are analyzing the media file, but then we're also adding custom metadata. We're making decisions based off of frame rate. As you can see, this fully customizable decision node allows you to branch the workflow based off of metadata. We're checking to see if it's a native Avid codec, and depending on all the decisions, you're going to end up with a high-res and a low-res clip checked into interplay. The best part is actually building one of these workflows, so let's do that. I'm going to hit Tools, Create Workflow, and up comes my blank workflow designer. On the left are all the different nodes you can string together to create one of these workflows, and those can be things like transcodes, rewraps, QC passes, things like adding a watermark, uploading to Aspera or YouTube, or setting to Black Pearl, making decisions, outputting XML, and launching a command line launcher. And to add one of these nodes, all you do is you drag and drop from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. It allows you to pick an existing template or create a new template, which is what we'll do. And on the left of this Platinum template editor, you have all the codecs we can make. We support many different codecs, as you can see, including things like H.265, JPEG 2000, QuickTime, in ProRes, H.264, and DNX flavors. We can make H.264s, XAVC files. In this case, let's start by making Avid media. So I'm just going to choose my incoming frame rate. We can then choose a codec. Let's stick with DNX HD, and we'll just make some DNX 36. We'll make a proxy workflow. I'm going to choose my path. This will generally be somewhere on your Nexis, but in this case, I'm going to write locally, and I'll take auto increment folder name so that it'll roll over if I hit 5,000 files, and I'll auto update my media database so that there's no scan time on a media composer once the media is written. Across the top, you have various other options, so I can do things like cropping and padding. I have a really easy to use audio channel mapper. I can add graphic or text overlays. I can do frame rate conversions. I can do text and or subtitle burn-in, and I can apply a LUT upon ingest. Once I'm happy with my template, I can just double click to add my template name. Let's turn off frame rate conversion, and I'm going to hit done. So now I have a really simple one-step workflow. Let's add a couple more steps. So I'm going to add a metadata extract at the front so that I can analyze as much as possible from the incoming clip. And then we'll output that AAF to a folder of your choosing. In this case, I'm just going to output it to my AAFs folder. And we'll hit done. We'll join this up. I could write to a second location if I needed by easily duplicating that workflow or node. I could also add multiple Avid transcodes or Platinum transcodes really easily. So let's say you need a proxy for Avid, but you also need a proxy for Premiere. Well, let's do that. So at the same time as making my Avid media, I'm going to create a ProRes 422 proxy, and we'll just say match the source size of that. And I'm going to hit done. So now we have two outputs. This one, instead of going to the AES folder, we'll go to my proxies folder. And we're going to hit done, hit OK. And let's give this workflow a name. So I'm going to call this create proxies. And we're going to hit done, save. So now in my workflows folder, I have my new workflow, which is called create proxies. And there's a few different ways I could submit this. I could take one of my clips and or cards from here and just select it and hit new job and apply my create proxies workflow. Or most commonly, I could use a watch folder. So here I have a watch folder, and you have different types of watch folders that are possible. We have a standard file watch folder, which will start a new job every time you drop a file in. We also have S3 watch folders, QuickTime reference watch folders, image sequence watch folders, and card watch folders. Card watch folders will wait for an entire camera card structure to be present before it submits the entire thing as a single job. We're going to leave it as standard, and we'll pick our new workflow, create proxies. We're going to update our watch folder, activate it, and then if I go to this location, all I have to do now is drop a file into my watch folder. And depending on your settings, You can have it pick up as quickly or as delayed as you want. So now it's detected that new item. It's going to scan it for a few seconds, and shortly it will send that job to Content Central. So now it's checking if it's still growing or not. And once it decides it's not growing anymore, it's going to send that job to Content Central, which is what it's just done. If I go to my Jobs tab, here's the job we've just submitted. Now, Content Agent is comprised of three main components. You have Content Agent, which is the UI you're looking at right now. You have Content Central, which is the database service or the brains of the operation. And you have Job Agent, which is your actual processing node. In this case, it's running a local Job Agent, but you can have Job Agent running on multiple computers, each performing up to 4 tasks simultaneously, thus creating a render farm. We have customers running up to 16 Job Agents off a single Content Central system. And again, the only requirement is Windows. So you can see that that job has just completed. Here it is at the bottom. If I now go to my AAFs folder, we have the new AAF I've just made. And if I open up Media Composer, I can then take the AAF I've just made and drag it into my bin. There's our clip. I can drag it down into my timeline. There it is. And if I, at this point, wanted to do some edits, I'm finished editing, but I need to deliver, as long as video effects are rendered, I can then output that sequence directly back to Content Agent. So instead of tying up your Avid station with transcode, you can deliver directly to us a finished sequence, choosing a workflow with our plugin, and we'll actually do the rendering. The other way to submit jobs is via Card Agent. So here, instead of using our UI or watch folders, you can have Card Agent installed on any PC on the network or multiple PCs, and it allows you to scan a card reader, a volume, or a hard drive for various camera card structures. You can do things like trim, rename, playback video, and you can also configure your workflow in such a way that you can also add custom metadata here. You can make fields mandatory, you can have dropdowns, you can have fully custom fields, and all those can actually become Avid columns if you need to, or they can become part of an XML that you export for a third-party MAM. Once you're happy, you can choose your workflow and then hit submit, and that will submit a job directly to Content Agent. So that was just a quick overview. If you want to get more details on Content Agent, go to route6.com or ask Keycode, because they know Content Agent inside and out. Thanks again, Keycode, for having us, and now back to you for some Q&A.
Thanks, everyone. The team will be joining us later at the end for the live Q&A. Please submit your questions via the YouTube, Facebook chats, or our Vimeo page. Now, let's talk with someone who's working with cross-software creative tools on a daily basis while under construction for an expansion and in a pandemic. Suzanne Greenfield and Dan Gordish with Boardwalk Pictures. After the interview, we'll be back live with Dan and our whole panel to answer all of your questions. Hi, Suzanne and Dan. Thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us about your positions and what you do at Boardwalk Pictures Cricket Lane.
Okay, so I'm the Senior Vice President of Post-Production. So I oversee our post facility as well as all of our current various documentary series and features that are in post-production right now. And then I'll throw to Dan.
I'm the technical supervisor at Boardwalk, and I come up with some of the creative workflows.
Can we go over some of the history of technology upgrades that have happened at your facility over the years?
Sure, so let me try to go back. So we initially started out with one Resolve bay and a mini Resolve room. So one full-fledged Resolve finishing suite, and then a secondary suite with a mini Resolve. And I believe we started with roughly 20 Avid systems. And I don't remember what our initial storage was, but we had the Quantum and the ISIS, but we're on our third or fourth expansion with storage right now. So that's kind of where we started. We were in 10,000 square feet and had 9 offline edit suites and a slew of story stations. And that was before Dan's day. So, and then we've slowly been adding additional stations and storage, as well as a storage DNA, which has become sort of an integral part of our workflow. And now we're expanding into 20,000 square feet, and we'll have 3 finishing bays. One that doubles as a 5-1 mix room. We've started coloring. We're now Dolby certified and color and deliver in HDR. And I think when it's all said and done, we will have, I think, roughly 18 offline edit suites, 3 finishing rooms, and more story stations than I can count at the moment.
What is the type of content you folks are making in your department? And also, walk us through the tech workflow, from ideas to shooting to edit, and then to delivery.
Sure. So I'll talk about sort of our the kind of shows that we deliver. We create premium documentary content. So Boardwalk really kind of started in more of like a marketing and advertising space early on. So it's sort of like taking that, it's not sacrificing, it's doing unscripted content without sacrificing quality is really the goal of Boardwalk Pictures and Cricket Lane. And then as far as the workflows go, you know, they're different for every project, but you know, every time we get a project, we really just like first look at what the creative need for that project is, and it's like what's the best cameras we can use in that environment, and then that's when things get really tricky for Dan, because we're shooting a lot of content. When you shoot documentaries, the shoot to edit ratio is really high, and we drive Dan nuts because we're constantly shooting docs in 4-6K, and that's where sort of like the Resolve workflow really comes in for us.
Housing all of this, you know, 4K, 6K media is a challenge, but then also just like the back end, the deliverables, when you're delivering, you know, and mastering in UHD, and then for Dolby Vision, you know, the storage requirements are astronomical. We have shows that shot 0.5 petabyte in, you know, 6 months, and then, you know, are quickly turning around like, hey, we're off to shoot our next season. Do you guys have everything backed up and archived and, you know, delivered and all of that? And then on top of that, for our creative process, it's kind of separate from StoreNext and from our LTO. Creatively, everything lives on the Avid Nexis, and that's sort of, you know, as far as like all the creatives in the building, the assistants, and you know, a lot of the producers and editors, all they really manage is, you know, everything just lives on the Nexis like it's supposed to. And that is sort of, you know, I think we all know that story. We all know what the Nexis is, but because of COVID, that Nexus isn't really a location anymore. It's, you know, our media isn't in one spot anymore. It's kind of just poof. It's been distributed, you know, up into the cloud and then down to everyone else's systems.
Can you tell us about some of the types of creative roles that you have on staff?
So we have, you know, a staff of a handful of post-production producers who oversee the projects from a nuts and bolts standpoint. There's a lot of creativity that's involved in that because they're trying to, you know, they're pushing the workflow, they're managing the teams, they're trying to deliver something on budget at the highest standard possible. We have, you know, we have many editors that come through our doors. They're not necessarily staff, but we have at least a dozen editors that are pretty much working with us year round. And then creative story producers as well, and assistant editors. And the story producers are collaborating with the editors on an Avid. And they're deep in the projects, and they're in some cases for shows putting together radio cuts. In other cases, they're doing string outs. We have Victor, who's our staff finishing artist, who does a lot of our online and color, as well as a couple of really great colorists that we work with that come in and do color on a handful of our projects. And then the assistant editors, who are kind of a catch-all for everything technical and everything else.
Boardwalk and Cricket Lane, we also do this in several different languages, and we do this with footage that's shot all over the world, and just about every country. I think like what our teams do that is just like it's crazy, it's magic, but like they can take like any language and cut a story, and Avid kind of helps guide all of that and make it make sense. Like when script sig jumps to a point, we'll bring in an interpreter and they'll say, oh yeah, that made sense. That bite right there just made sense.
What creative software does your team leverage? Media Composer, Adobe, Creative Cloud, Resolve?
We do a little bit of Premiere.
After Effects.
Almost everything we do comes through the Resolve at this point.
Now for the fun part, what does your shared storage network look like? How does your team go about sharing media and projects?
We sort of, in a natural, perfect vacuum of a world where COVID doesn't exist, the shared storage is just, you have your Avid Nexis, and you have your whole array of media drives, sound effects libraries, graphics, music, all of that everyone's used to seeing. And then now we have COVID, and we have everyone working remotely, and that sort of started out for us. We were actually in a great position because the majority of our shows had already been shot, so it was just sort of a matter of distributing media, like where media would live on an island with the editor. But as time goes on, we continue to shoot shows in countries that aren't necessarily locked down, or we're shooting shows that are like crazy Zoom hybrids that are, more COVID friendly productions. Like footage is still coming in, and that's sort of where, Fabric has changed the game. They have allowed us to basically automate updates to every editor and producer's hard drive, and those hard drives more or less act as caches to the Nexis. And we can have editors, we've had editors that left because of construction noise, and then with Fabric we're able to go home, do their cut, and then come back in for a screening, and everything is there when they come back in the Nexus and watch it back in the screening room.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. Dan, I know we'll be seeing you shortly for the live Q&A. We'll be transitioning to that right about now. All right, now we're live with your Q&A. Please ask any questions you've got for any of our panel today into the Vimeo, YouTube, or Facebook chats. One question that we did forget to ask, it's for Kiko Dan. Dan, how have you been able to leverage Content Agent to streamline ingest workflows for Keycode clients?
Wow, that's a good question, Jeff. Thanks. We've got a client that is absolutely in love with Content Agent. They used to try to ingest material from camera cards, from downloaded clips that were sent to them. They were trying to ingest it with Media Composer and check it into their interplay system. And while all that is possible, it always tied up an edit bay, and they wanted to get to editing faster. And their biggest complaint was that they always had to ingest things. And I said, well, let's get you Content Agent. We're offloading all of that ingest process over to a standalone server, and it's able to run multiple streams inbound all at the same time. And one of the biggest things that they loved about it, they get these files that are downloaded from a webinar provider. So it's recordings of the webinars, and they're going to cut them down for use in other areas. And the file that's being downloaded is not quite, in industry standard, to say the least. There's an odd frame rate, an odd raster size, a little bit of an odd codec in there, and it was very slow to process with Media Composer, but bringing it in through Content Agent, it was much faster. If the file was corrupt, it wouldn't even attempt it and not even waste time. It knew that it was a bad file before it started running it. And they were just in love with how smart and how efficient and how fast Content Agent was.
Very cool. So Boardwalk, Dan, a question from Conrad 2. For the Boardwalk team, how is it working remote during the pandemic? How are assets being distributed? How is finishing done remote, especially with needs of communication?
We're using a lot of different tools for asset distribution, primarily offline assets. We're talking like Avid media files. We're using DNA Fabric, and DNA Fabric has been amazing in helping us automate, bin distribution and, offline MXF files. And then we're also using, Amazon S3 cloud storage for pushing files. And for online is, we're typically exporting files and, sort of going the iPad playback route for online, and, reviews and whatnot, we're using Evercast. So it's a big mix of tools, but Fabric is our favorite new tool that we're using right now, and that has been just it really taken the workflow to like next level.
Awesome. So quick question here for Michael. Are there limits to the types of files you can have in Avid workspaces? And
I'm muted. I was muted. Limits to what you can. Well, actually, no. I mean, the great thing about Nexis is, you're basically creating a workspace depending on what you want. The workspace I mentioned in the demo could be music. It could be graphics. It could be just simple files. It could be notes, spreadsheets. Anything. It's just storage that you are deciding basically what you want to put on there, and also dictating who can see it. So even though you may have 500 workspaces, everything can be divided up, and you're deciding by the administrator who can and can't see what workspace. So easily turned off and turned on depending on what their role is. But yeah, there's no limits to what is actually going on a specific workspace.
very cool. And for those who are in webinar bingo, I was muted, sorry. You fill in that square. A question from Morgan Foreman, and this is going to be for Anand. Is there a way for Content Agent to be centralized so the same workflows are accessible from any edit computer on the network? For example, a Media Central type of app.
Yeah, well, Content Agent can work in a few different ways. It's a great question. Primarily, we have one main Content Central server, and that acts as kind of your queue manager. So all jobs get submitted to Content Central. Now, from a Media Central or Media Composer station, you can then, each editor could have our little applet installed on their Media Composer station, and that can actually have a send to context menu. So you can send a workflow directly from your timeline or your bin to Content Agent of a finished sequence, for example. And then alternatively, you can use watch folders, so people from anywhere can drop files and or cards into the queue, and then it'll start processing in the back end. And in a Media Central production management environment, you can use watch folders. So within Interplay Access or Media Central UX, you can drag and drop sequences or master clips into a folder that we're watching, and then that will trigger a transfer.
Cool. Question from Eric Jacobs. Is there a way to share Avid projects in the cloud with bin locking and then work off of local storage, almost as if the projects are stored in a shared Dropbox that supports bin locking? Maybe Boardwalk Dan, that might be a good one for you.
So, you know, what the Nexis does is it's very hard to replicate. But Fabric comes pretty close to that. You know, like that's essentially what Fabric is going to do. It's basically just it's a very customizable high-end sync, like cache and sync tool. So like it will keep your local storage perfectly in sync with your Nexis. And then, you know, like the Avid media part and the distribution part, it handles beautifully. Bin locking is, you know, that is where things get a little squirrely. But like with our workflow, what we have is very similar to a Dropbox like folder. So you have editors and producers dropping bins into what we call the sandbox, which is just a friendly term, but it's essentially a sandbox like folder that we throw at the very top of the Avid project. And you know, so long as you are the author of the bin, you have the rights to update that bin and you know, and distribute it. But you know, it works within, you know, within limitations. So like, you know, if you are the author of the bin, you can update that at will, but you know, you will not be able to reach into somebody else's bin that they currently have open. It's going to be locked. So I would say for most teams, it's pretty identical to working in like an episodic, like in an episodic type distribution where, like, say you're the assistant and you want to update a cut, it would sort of be like, you can't reach into like an editor on 104 and update their cut right away. You know, that bin will be locked. So like the Fabric in the bin locking world, if you are not the author of the bin, it will always treat that bin as locked. So it actually works out kind of as intended.
I think if I can just jump in quick as well. I mean, I think depending on configuration, I mean, there's so many different ways that people can be set up. Of course, Boardwalk has the way that they're working. There are, if you're trying to replicate sort of a collaborative environment with people connecting to a Nexus as if they were on-prem, there are virtual machines that can be set up to handle it, and basically you're remoting into a media composer to be able to share, and you have all that bin locking. So it depends on if, you know, media is, you can have Nexus in the cloud, you can have media locally. But again, I mean, it depends on how you want to work and what hardware you have to connect. So it can be done. Of course, Boardwalk is working very effectively the way that they are being able to simulate this type of workflow.
Yeah, I would just say, I would just sort of add there, like there's bin locking, it works. It's just not quite, like, it will never be the same as an on-prem Nexus, or, you know, it will never work as naturally as as like, HP, RGS and whatnot. Like there's sort of like this ownership and authorship stage that you have to work around, but it's actually, I feel like most teams, this is very natural to them.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'd add a little bit to that real quick. As you guys can imagine, with COVID happening, everyone's starting to work from home. Avid's definitely looked at a number of ways to help this process. And I would just say there's some very interesting things coming out in the next 3 to 6 months that might help a lot with that. I'm not obviously allowed to talk about vaporware, but it's stuff that I think will help a lot of people out, especially with the bin sharing.
Awesome. And also, to be clear, the fabric product is from a company called Storage DNA. And that answers Conrad's follow-up question. And then let me go to Con's question. The folks from Avid can kick in on this. Does bin locking and sharing projects in Nexis and Adobe work the same way as Avid? Media Composer.
The whole thing. Media Composer, we've done bin locking and project sharing for a long time. So we have it pretty well done. The Adobe Productions it's using the similar, I think, methodology of the way you're basically opening up a project and you still have bin locking. The whole technology behind it is a little different, but realize that you can work with Adobe Productions on Nexis. So you can open up a production, you can share. It's on a workspace. Again, working a little differently depending on if you're in Media Composer or Adobe, but if you have productions, you can be on Nexis. If you have Avid, bin locking and project sharing the way that we've been doing it for years. So it's just a matter of what technology you're using. If that answers the question.
I think it does. There was a follow-up question there. Not sure who it's from, but how does Nexis work with the interplay system? Is there any overlap?
I'll take that question. The interplay system is cataloging all the contents and assets, as we call it. Your sequences, your effects, your clips, all that type of stuff. It's cataloging all of that information, much like Media Composer does in a bin. Interplay or production management is doing it in a global way for your facility. What it is doing, and just like in Media Composer where the clips are it's just simply metadata pointing to the actual media files. The media files are what reside on Nexis, and the metadata information is either resides in Media Composer if you're in a non production management environment, and you're just doing shared projects. All that management's handled by Media Composer. But if you have the full-on production management tool set, you can now check things in globally, and that also opens up the world to doing. You have to the world of doing archiving and restoring of media much easier. Using the tools that are in the production management. So hopefully that answers your question.
Very cool. So with the mention of asset management and production asset management, Anand, what third-party asset managers can Content Agent work with for metadata and media check-in?
So we work with a wide variety. We're pretty flexible. We do have existing integrations with IPB and CatDB. But since it's so flexible, we can export essentially any type of XML. We do have customers that are using it with Homebrew, MEMS, and a few other systems as well. And Levels Beyond has also done integration with Content Agent.
Very cool. So question for Boardwalk, Dan. How do you go about creating file structure to keep the team organized? Are there any tips for AE types or production management types to work with folders and subfolders?
That's most AEs already have a pretty solid understanding of like folder structure and how to build all of that out. I guess it always starts with the EP. Like I've worked on some shows where the EP is very particular about the order and the file structure. So I would say, it usually depends on how your EP likes to see things, and then it kind of defaults to how the AE wants to set it up. And that, every show is different. Certain shows, they've been going on for 5-6 seasons. They have a set structure. Courses up at the top. You're gonna have a groups folder. You're gonna have, archival folders, B-roll, polls. It's something collaborative, and every time we have a new project, it's something we always discuss with the EPs, story producers, and editors first, and sort of like, hey, here's this generic template. How do you guys want to organize it from here? And then, in regards to fabric and whatnot, which is sort of like our new challenge is the only rule that you have to really keep in mind is that fabric will obey all of your folder and subfolders, so long as there's something in that folder to sync. So that was just kind of like the only, gotcha, thing that I had to explain to AEs right off the bat is like, just because you set up a folder structure doesn't mean that you're going to see it right away. But as you start to put bins and scripts in those folders, that will distribute and populate. That was just kind of the only catch.
Cool. And the other thing I've seen, you walk into a facility, there's a workflow workspace or an assistant editor workspace where they keep template projects. So, a team of AEs will be like, oh, it's this kind of project. Bam, I've got the template out. Let's, modify that a little bit, but usually saving the best version of something you've got lets you create a really great template. A follow-up question from Khan. Apart from AAF sharing for sequences with other applications, any plans for XML from Avid? And I'm assuming that means also Media Composer.
AAF has always been our, go-to format for Exchange. I think it'll always be there. For XML, linking, we still can create XML through FilmScribe. We still have those tools for exporting. Reading XML, people are usually using another application or something to maybe convert that XML to bring it in. So I'm sure it's something that we've looked at, but as you know, is not something that is used at this point. But always good feature requests.
Feature requests are the lifeblood of this business. So I think one last question here for Boardwalk, Dan, and also other folks can kick in. Does your facility use a mixture of Mac, PC, Linux? Does that impact your ability at all to share files between various pieces of software?
Nope. This is real short. No, it doesn't. There's room for it. Yes, there's always room for it. The way Avid sees a workspace on a Mac is a little different than the drive lettering on Windows, but that's not like a show-stopping issue. I can say that Fabric, we have tested it out on, we tested Fabric out on CentOS to Mac to PC. We've used it on all 3 operating systems without any major issues there. It all works. And at Boardwalk, our key code was set up this amazing XAN, StorNex, quantum storage for us that is, working beautifully between all 3 operating systems as well. And that is like our main, that's our main backbone for our facility here. But no major issues there.
Very cool. So one quick question for Keycode Dan that just came in, and probably some other folks want to jump in on this. How easy is it to make a Nexis bigger? You've got more stuff coming in. How do you get that? How do you take the 10-pound bag and make it a 15-pound bag?
Well, luckily, the Nexis system, the Nexis Enterprise system, was designed from the get-go to be very easily expandable by just adding more media packs to your system, and media packs go in engines. So we have engines, or Avid has an E2, which will hold a single media pack. They've got an E4, which will hold 2 media packs. Media packs consist of 10 drives. So if you're getting a media pack with 10 terabyte drives, or you're looking at 100 terabytes. So you can easily add 100 terabytes to a system just by adding another engine with a media pack. One of the things that we've done for many of our clients, they want to expand their system, but they're not really ready to go super big, but they want a little extra elbow room. So they only want to add 1 media pack, but we'll have a discussion about installing an E4, which holds 2 media packs, but will half populate it. And then that gives them the ability to get more storage now, and 3 months later down the line, when they need more space, or whenever that happens, they just call us back up and we order another media pack and come down and install it. And it's very, very easily expandable, up to, if I recall correctly, 64 engines and petabytes and petabytes of available storage there. You can also make them go faster with the E2 SSD chassis or engines, and you can get some pretty fast read and write time. And those systems you can expand up to having 64 of them on the system as well. Did I miss anything there, guys?
I think we could add a few things too. We have an E5 chassis as well, which is 5 U's that holds 8 media packs. I think right now for our production storage, our largest media packs are 140 terabytes. So they're pretty big and sizable, and you can build those out as needed. We also have a nearline solution, which is an E5 as well. Just I call it slower. It's not any slower. We just limit the bandwidth so it's less expensive to put in, so you guys can park older projects on it or things along those lines. I think one thing that a lot of people forget about is the ability to have our cloud spaces too. It's something that's pretty easy to connect right up through the management console. I think Michael threw a second at that there on the demo. And what you can do there is log right into it and easily move older projects to the cloud. And so you can utilize the storage you currently have and move them back and forth, and it's all controlled via Nexis. So I think that's a couple of things that are there. And you're right, 64 media packs. And with every media pack on spinning disks too, you increase your speed by either 400 or 600 megabytes per second of throughput, and it's completely linear as well. So there's a lot of features there we could go through, but we're at the top of the hour. So
a couple other things I just want to throw in there, which is really important to note, is you can run just Adobe, you can run just Apple, you can run just Avid. I mean, you don't have to have Media Composer. Nexis runs, we fully support it on Apple, Adobe, Blackmagic, and we also support now Autodesk. So for VFX, great collaboration using Nexis, which is good. And thanks for bringing up cloud spaces again, because it's something that you get, I think, 250 gigs or something for free when you get Nexis, and it's easy to deploy. You just select it, cloud space, and now you have something that you can upload projects or media to the cloud and get it off the Nexus just temporarily.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up the Adobe thing real quick too. We have a protocol that goes for our Nexus, the Nexus clients, and it's one of those things that people don't typically talk about, but the protocol we utilize is actually baked into Premiere and things along those lines to advance the speed that goes through. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. They think it would be something that's just an Avid environment thing, and it's not. We definitely are very collaborative with our ecosystem partners to make sure that everything goes as quick as possible.
Awesome. And by Autodesk, while you can store AutoCAD files on a Nexus, we're really kind of talking about a high-end video finishing tool called Flame, which has done a lot of episodic television over the last several years. We've run out of questions, so my apologies to Matt Damon, and thanks to our panel for joining us here today. If you have questions that didn't get answered and you were about to ask, or you're watching one of the replays of this, please toss them into the YouTube or Facebook chats, and we'll either the KeyCode team will answer it, or we will go out and get answers from the folks that you see on the panel today. And we want to thank everybody for joining us, and everybody have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
Yo.